In 1996, on a quiet, rainy afternoon just outside Chicago, a small adoption center saw an unexpected visitor. George Wittman, a 58-year-old janitor with silver-streaked hair, rough hands, no family, and little in the way of savings, walked in, carrying only a worn envelope of papers and a heart full of nerves. He hadn't come looking for the perfect child. In fact, he wasn't looking for just one. At his church, he'd heard about 3 little girls who had been waiting for a home for years. No one wanted them. "They're sisters," the director explained hesitantly. "Black, very close in age. Most people want babies. Not older, bonded children. And definitely not all 3. But George didn't hesitate. When he entered the dimly lit room and saw them for the first time, something shifted inside him. The eldest, 6-year-old Amara, stood in front of the others like a shield, her sharp, guarded eyes watching closely, already far too familiar with the signs of danger. 4-year-old Zena sat quietly on a bench, hands folded tightly, lips sealed. No one had ever heard her speak. The youngest, Naomi, just 3 years old, whimpered whenever someone entered the room. The girls had been through a painful cycle, bounced between foster homes, emergency shelters, and failed adoptions. Each had scars that ran deep. Amara had been beaten in one home. Zena had spent hours locked in closets. Naomi had forgotten how to smile. George looked at the 3 girls and said softly, "No one's leaving anyone behind. If I take one, I take all." Raising them wasn't a heroic act. It was grueling. George brought them to his tiny, run-down, one-bedroom apartment. He gave them the only bed and slept on the couch himself. To keep food on the table, he juggled 3 jobs: school janitor by day, parking lot sweeper by night, and dishwasher on the weekends. Each girl bore her trauma in her own way. Amara, once defiant, would cry in her sleep, overwhelmed by nightmares. George would sit beside her, humming gently until her sobs faded. She had a gift for numbers, but years of being dismissed by teachers made her doubt her intelligence. Zena remained completely silent for the first 8 months. George never pressured her to speak. Every evening, he'd sit quietly beside her, holding her hand while she drew pictures. Then one night, after he gave her a second-hand notebook with flowers, on the cover she finally whispered her first words, "Thank you, Daddy." George wept in silence in the kitchen so the girls wouldn't see. Naomi suffered from night terrors, crying out for the birth mother she could barely remember. George held her hand through the worst of it, whispering the same promise again and again. "I'm not leaving." But it wasn't just the trauma or the poverty. It was also the stares, the comments from strangers in grocery stores who would ask, "Are you babysitting?" Strangers would ask. Teachers whispered among themselves, questioning if George was truly their father. Even some social workers doubted him, making surprise visits, always expecting something to go wrong. Once, at a supermarket, Amara overheard a woman mutter, "What's a white man doing with 3 little black girls? That doesn't look right." Amara cried the whole night. George never argued back. Instead, he taught the girls how to stand tall. "The world will question if you belong," he told them. "Don't wait for their answer. Give them yours." Every fall, he managed to scrape together enough money for school supplies. When the girls outgrew their shoes, he patched them up or went barefoot himself. During the holidays, they baked cornbread and made garlands from paper. He couldn't afford gifts, so he gave them journals, undivided attention, and his favorite refrain, "Education is your exit. I can't give you wealth, but I can give you the road." And they followed that road. By age 12, Amara had become a math prodigy. Zena, once silent, found her voice and joined the debate team. Naomi turned her nightmares into words and won a statewide essay competition at 16. Yet through it all, George never changed. Same scuffed boots, same worn shirt, same kind, steady eyes. When Zena once asked why he never dated or remarried, he simply smiled and said, "I already raised the loves of my life." Years passed. The girls graduated high school, then college. Amara earned a scholarship in engineering. Zena pursued law. Naomi chose medicine. George, now in his 80s, retired quietly. He never asked for help. He stayed in the same humble apartment, wearing the same white shirt. Then, one ordinary morning, 27 years after signing those adoption papers, something extraordinary happened. 3 luxury cars pulled up to his building. 3 strong, successful women stepped out. They stepped out of the cars dressed with elegance, grace, and unmistakable pride. One wore a sleek black dress adorned with bright beads. Another was in a sharp, formal black suit. The third in a stunning, crimson gown, shimmered as the early morning sun began to rise. They had come to give back the love only one man had ever seen in them. Just as the city was waking, George shuffled out of his apartment, the same modest place he'd called home, for nearly 30 years. He wore his usual white t-shirt, the collar frayed, and his shoes cracked with age. He had no idea that this quiet, ordinary morning was about to become the most extraordinary day of his life. He had just taken his usual seat on the park bench when he heard it, the low hum of engines. Slowly, 3 luxury cars pulled up to the curb, a sleek black Tesla, a polished silver Mercedes, and finally, a brilliant orange Lamborghini SUV that turned every head on the street. George squinted and reached for his glasses, but before he could put them on, he froze. 3 women stepped out, graceful, radiant, confident. Amara wore a fitted black dress, and around her neck was the same style of necklace George had once saved every penny to buy for her school recital. Zena, in a perfectly tailored black suit, now stood tall as a respected voice in child advocacy law. Naomi, glowing in a crimson gown, had her medical badge clipped to her purse, the light catching it just so. For a long moment, George couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Naomi reached him first. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling, tears spilling down her cheeks. He shook his head slowly, overwhelmed, disbelief etched into every line of his weathered face. "Is it really you?" Zena stepped forward next, gently placing a soft black pouch into his hand. Inside, a set of car keys. Then Amara spoke, her voice cracking with emotion. "It's all yours, Daddy. The car, the house, everything." George's lip trembled. He stared at the keys, at the Lamborghini, then back at them, his daughters. "Why?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Naomi answered, her eyes shining. "Because you loved us when no one else would." "Because you loved us when no one else did," Naomi said softly. "Because you stayed. Because you made us who we are." 27 years earlier, the world had labeled them unadoptable, too damaged, too difficult, too different. But George had never believed that. And now, standing on the sidewalk, surrounded by the living proof of everything he'd quietly sacrificed and nurtured, he wept. Not for the gifts, but because they remembered. And they didn't just remember, they gave back. They had bought him a new home, a house with wide windows, a garden, and no rent. They hired a private caregiver to support him in his old age. And they launched a nonprofit in his honor, the George Wittman Foundation, dedicated to helping children the world often overlooks find loving, permanent homes. "You never asked for anything," Zena said, smiling through tears, "so we gave you everything." People passing by had stopped to watch. Some took pictures. One woman across the street wiped her eyes. In that moment, George wasn't just a father. He had become a symbol of what quiet, unwavering love can grow into when it's finally recognized. Later that afternoon, inside his new home, George sat in a soft recliner. Around him were framed memories, the girls' graduations, their degrees, their wedding days. He gently touched each one, eyes misted with gratitude. On the mantel stood a single photo in a gold frame, the only one from the orphanage. 3 little black girls clinging to one another, uncertain of the world around them. Beneath it, a plaque. Read, "To the man who saw queens in orphans, who gave us a name, a future, and love. We were never unwanted. We were always yours." At a small press event the following week, when asked why they had done all this, Amara replied simply, "Because when the world refused to adopt us, this man chose us. He gave up his youth for our childhoods. He gave up comfort for our dreams. Now, we choose to honor him." "Healing," Naomi said. "We simply gave back what the world never gave him." George, sitting quietly beside his daughters, managed just one sentence, his voice barely more than a whisper. "I'm proud, not because of the house or the car, but because my girls became exactly who they were meant to be, and I got to witness it." In the end, it wasn't about wealth. It wasn't about success. It was about love, being returned to the one who gave it first, without ever expecting anything in return. And the man the world once called too poor to be a parent, he turned out to be the richest father of them all. If this story touched you, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more emotional, dramatic, and inspiring true stories.